It was back in August on the 17th, which was a Saturday, and I was up in Detroit with Luke. Brett and Carson were at home. Brett was carrying some groceries in the house, and Carson and Sadie were playing in the yard, just like normal. And what we think happened, it's hard to tell from a 4-year-old, is that Carson had picked Sadie up and then fell on her. Carson's about 50 pounds, and when you pick Sadie up, she sticks her legs straight out like a deer. And so that kind of presented the perfect opportunity for a break. He had called our local vet office. One of the vets came in on an emergency basis. We were so thankful that he didn't have to make a drive up to the city to get her looked at. But they did x-rays and said definitely a very fractured femur. That it was broken, pretty broken. From that point, the vet said you've got like 3 surgical options basically. However, they couldn't do any of them there. So the gold standard is to do an orthopedic plate. I'm going to include some links in the description of what the different surgery options we were given would look like. But the surgical plate, when we got quotes on it, was over $5,000. And as much as I love my dog, that wasn't going to be doable right then. So we moved on to looking at the other 2 options. One of which was to do a surgical pin and wiring. And we called probably 15 different vets to see what they would recommend, or if they felt they could do the surgery, what they would charge. With that, they run a pin down her leg and stop it just above her knee joint. And that pin was probably like 10 to 12 inches long, and then used wires to go around both sides of the break, kind of in a figure 8 pattern. And the pin and the wires would stay in her leg for probably like 4 to 8 weeks. At that point, they would then pull the pin. There should be a good callus formed on the break, and then the wires would stay in forever. So that was the first option. That one was a little bit better on the budget. The other option would have been to amputate just right away. Just kind of cut her losses and amputate. But we wanted to give her a chance to have 4 legs. So we ended up doing the surgical pin and the wires. We took her to the vet. She had broken on Saturday night, and we took her to the vet on Monday. They did the surgery on a Tuesday, and we picked her up that Wednesday. That pin, when we picked her up, it made me nervous. They had done an incision lower on her leg where he worked on the wires and the brake, and she had several stitches there. But then the pin ran up the length of her femur, and it stuck out at her hip joint. So she just had a couple inches of pin sticking out her leg, and it was kind of sharp. It was rubbing against her skin there, and you could tell she was uncomfortable, and it was draining, which, that's normal after a surgery, but it was a lot of drainage. And so when we brought her home, we were told, she's got to be kenneled. She's got to stay in the kennel. No having her out and about. She's really just got to have minimal breaks and stay kenneled. And she has to stay calm and sedated. If you don't know boxers well, calm and sitting still is not their forte. So he gave us some medication so that she could have up to 50 milligrams a day of this sedative. And we could do it 50 milligrams twice a day. So that's what we started with. And so we brought her home that Wednesday. We were doing, 4 different medications a day at multiple times. And she was just out of her kennel to eat and have bathroom breaks. It amounted to over 20 hours a day in the kennel. She hated it. She hated the pin sticking out. She wouldn't leave it alone. She kept licking on it. And by Friday, somehow she popped the end of that pin underneath her skin, which only made it all worse. She had so much more drainage. She really wouldn't leave it alone. We were trying to not do a cone if we could help it. We had tried putting sweatpants on her, just trying whatever we could to not have her mess with it, and it wasn't working, and I knew a cone was going to add more stress, but ultimately we ended up doing that. She hated me for it. The looks that dog gave me every time we put it on, but we had to do what we had to do. We were still doing several medications a day, and she went back in for a recheck about 10 days after her original surgery. They said it was fine that the pin was under the skin. However, the day of the recheck, she stopped using the leg. You know, those first 10 days, she was trying to use it very tenderly, but the day of the recheck, she completely stopped bearing any weight on it. And the doctor had warned us this could happen. He did an x-ray at that recheck and said that the pin had, at this point, eroded into her knee joint. It had wiggled itself down and was poking through her knee, causing her pain every time she stepped down with her knee. So it couldn't stay that way. At that point, he gave us two options. We could do a second surgery to try to back the pin out. He said he had never had to do this before, but he would try to come up with some way to externally fixate the pin. Put some kind of a clamp or something medical grade on the end of that little pin to stop it from sliding back down again. That was another several $100 surgery. The other option was, you know, to cut our losses and cut off her leg. We were like, we've already come this far. Hopefully he'll just pull the pin back a little bit, and, you know, and then we'll have another couple weeks of healing and be done, and her leg will be fine. So this was on a Friday. It was Labor Day weekend. He said we could have picked her up on Saturday, and I really liked the idea of just boarding her. Boarding her that whole weekend so she could have the surgery on Saturday morning and then stay in a kennel at the animal hospital where they would take really good care of her for a few days following the surgery. And then we would pick her up the next week. So that's what we ended up doing. I thought it would give her leg a little bit of time to heal without any temptation of wanting to play with the boys or run around with Abby. And so we picked her up on Tuesday. When we picked her up, she still wasn't using the leg. She would kind of tap it on the ground, but really she just kind of, she'd like swing it behind her when she was excited, but she still wasn't putting any weight on that leg. The vet said, you know, maybe it's just that her knee joint's kind of tender from having that pin just poke in there. We're just going to have to wait and see. But he at that point had done some like big clamp thing on the end and had that all wrapped in a bandage, and then had put a soft cast on the rest of her leg. He hadn't done any kind of like a splint or a soft cast before, and I kind of liked it because it made it harder for her to try to use the leg. I had thought maybe she wasn't going to use it just because that cast was heavier and it made it hard for her to bend her knee. So we went on from there. It was, you know, I wish he would have done the cast to begin with and fixed it externally, but we went on the next couple weeks. He said we could actually give her double the sedative that he told us to initially, and so that upped it to like 100 milligrams twice a day of the sedative, and that worked. She slept a lot. She stayed very calm, and so we went on the next few weeks. My husband took her in for a recheck. We were taking her every week, and my husband took her for a recheck, and the vet said, you know, the bone callus is looking good. Let's go ahead and make an appointment to put her under sedation and take the pin out. And so we had made that appointment for a Wednesday. The Monday prior to the appointment, which was Monday of this week, she somehow hooked the hardware that he had put on the outside of her hip, hooked it on the wire of her kennel overnight, and pulled the pin out by herself. you normally put a dog under like deep sedation or anesthesia to take that pin out, because it's extremely painful to do. And she did it by herself overnight. I don't know if she, thought she'd save us some money because then we didn't have to pay to take it out, or if it was just bothering her that much. But Brett had let her out to go to the bathroom in the morning and looked at her and realized the hardware was all gone. The pin wasn't in her leg, and it was on the ground in her kennel. She'd pulled it out all by herself. So he woke me up. He said, call the vet whenever you get up and see what they say. I asked if we could just keep the appointment on Wednesday or if they wanted to go ahead and see her on Monday. And they said just bring her on in. So I dropped her off, and they were going to fit her in the schedule and call me with what they had to do. And a couple hours after I dropped her off, that was when we got the call that it was time to amputate. When they looked at her leg, he could just see a lot of arthritis developed already in her hip, in her knee, her ankle. The muscles were starting to atrophy already in her foot. And she also had a fever, which she'd never had a fever before at any of the rechecks, which was a sign that she had an infection. And he could tell when he looked at the leg, some of the drainage, which we had been told was just normal, had gotten to a point where it was too much. So she definitely had the infection. And of course, the surgery cost more money to cut the leg off. And as much as I hated the idea, we went back and forth about what to do. She's a 6-month-old dog. The last thing I wanted to see was her put down. That got brought up. It got brought up in the time we talked to the vet that day, and he had said he didn't want to see a fracture lead to putting a dog down either. So if we couldn't figure out a way to pay for it, we could sign the dog over to the vet and they would arrange an adoption with someone that could pay for it. We understood we've put thousands of dollars into this dog already. But ultimately, I couldn't put her down. And it's like we've invested this much in this dog and keeping her healthy and having her be a part of our family. I don't think the kids would have understood. And so that was when we made the call to go ahead and do the amputation. The expense of it sucks. I hate it. We didn't get pet insurance. It's an option for people. We didn't have that. So we just are making it work, but that's how we got to where we are today. So.